This is a complete guide on Mario Party DS RNG Manip for Boss Bash speedrunning. I'll be explaining RNG Manip for physical DS runs and for emulator runs. I'll also explain a route that gives a 100% chance for God Hexo pattern. I'll have the current chapter showing in the top left at all times and a subsection under it. Here are all the chapter timestamps if you want to skip to anything specific. In this tutorial, I'm using Windows 11 and Desmium as my emulator of choice. So I'm not sure how this tutorial translates to other operating systems and emulators, but I'm not gonna figure that out. First of all, huge credit to Maziari's TAS for making literally all of this possible, because I literally got all my information just from this one video. So the RNG of the game, or the ROM, is initialized as this formula. The end part here isn't that important, it's this first part that's interesting. TTV is something I'll be referring to for the rest of this video. It stands for true time value, and it's hours plus minutes plus seconds. What the game basically does is it sets the RNG to start as the system time. That's the easiest way to think about it. So that lets us load the ROM at the same time of the day and get the same starting RNG. RNG is progressed in steps or changes, as I'll refer to them as. The formula for one of these changes is this. And again, this end part here is not important. Since these are just formulas, I can use it to automate programs to search for optimal TTVs and routes automatically. So using Python, I found that TTV28 had a route with a 100% consistent God Hexo, without any external programs to track your position like we had to use before. This route is what I do when I do blindfolded speedruns, where my PB is currently a 350-32. This route only requires the memorization of these three strings, which I'll come back to later. To get this route going for a physical DS, you're going to want to bring out your DS as well as some form of a timer. This is just a one-time thing to get a start time for your game and DS. I'll just use my phone's stopwatch. First, you're going to want to get a general idea of when a certain thing happens. So you're going to load the game and wait for a white flash followed by a black fade-in to the Hudson logo. Keep a slight mental track of when this black fade starts. Then close out of the game, and then you're going to launch the game again and start the stopwatch at the same time. When you see it doing the black fade, immediately stop the stopwatch. Depending on the time you get on your stopwatch, you're going to want to set your DS time to something different when you're going to do runs. Here is a spreadsheet of the stopwatch times versus what system times you're going to be using. These aren't specific, but these work if you don't want to do the math yourself. For me, my DS load time is a little over 8 seconds, so I'm using system time 1959. Then we're going to get into setting up for an actual run. So go to your DS settings and change the system time to the time you got from the spreadsheet. In my case, that's 1959. Then you set that, and now you have 1 minute to find your Mario Party DS game and get ready to launch it. If getting to the game takes longer than that, you can set the system time to 1 minute lower. But you do want to use the same rolls over to value on the right as before. Then, when the time rolls over to this value in the spreadsheet, you want to launch the game. When you get in, you should be on the right TTV of 28. You can test this by going to Minigames, Free Play, 4 players, selecting Mario, and then selecting Random and getting Peach, Waluigi, and Yoshi. Now doing this causes the RNG to change and throws the rest of this run. So this is also just something we do once to ensure that we can hit the right TTV consistently. Now, if you get Peach, Luigi, and Wario, you need to use the spreadsheet line just above the one you're currently using. And if you get Peach, Luigi, and Waluigi, you need to use the spreadsheet line just under the one you're currently using. And if you're not getting any of these three, you probably fucked up big time and need to do the stopwatch steps again. If you see Peach, Waluigi, and Yoshi, try loading the game for that a couple of times to see if it's a consistent load time for that TTV. For me, it is. If it's not, I'm not really sure how to fix that, but you could try delaying your game enter by a bit. So let's say your reaction time and your load time gives you about a 50-50 between TTV 27 and 28. This way, you could delay entering the game by about half a second after your reaction time and get TTV 28 consistently. As for emulator setup, there's multiple ways you can set up your PC system time. Method 1 is to download the file timetool.exe in the description. If that seems sketchy, you can also download the Python file itself, but then you're also going to have to install libraries. It has two buttons. One sets the system time to 000024, the other resyncs system time to normal. Another way to do it is to open terminal with admin privileges by searching for cmd and then pressing run as administrator and then typing time 000024, for example, and then pressing enter. Another way to do it is to press Windows plus R and then typing in timedate.cpl and then pressing enter. Then here, press change date and time, where you can set your system time yourself down to the second. Now, for all these three, you're going to want to either have the system time showing on Windows or on the emulator. Emulator is probably the easiest. For Desmim, which is what I use, you go to View, HUD, then Display RTC, and RTC stands for Real-Time Clock. For Windows, you can right-click the system time bottom right of your screen, and then press Adjust Date and Time. Then, when in Settings, press the drop-down arrow at Show Time and Date in the system tray, then enable Show Seconds in System Tray Clock. And now you can see the seconds down at the system tray. Then, whenever you want to do a run, you set the time to something under TTV 28, like for example 000024, and then you wait for 000028, and just as it hits that, you make sure the ROM is unpaused and you reset by pressing Ctrl plus R. If you want, optionally, you can get a feel for the ROM reload timing by checking the RNG address. To do that, go to Tools, then RAM Watch, then press New, and then enter the address on screen and make it a 4-byte hexadecimal. Then, when you reset, you want to hit this value on screen, just having it end in C6 essentially. If you can get that consistently, you can get TTV 28 consistently. Now keep in mind that RAM Watch isn't allowed in actual runs, so you should only use it optionally to practice getting the timing down for reloading the ROM before doing runs. Now that you can get TTV 28 consistently, we can actually get to doing a run. The early game has very little RNG changes. So menu nav doesn't change RNG at all, and the character selection doesn't affect RNG at all. So you just enter boss bash normally. The first boss we have is Feed and Seed, and here the RNG fluctuates in a very predictable pattern. The most important thing is to be fast enough to not let any seeds drop when you throw a seed into his mouth. Because if any drop, you have to close out and try again. If none drop for all 3 throws, you should be getting 3 middle seeds with no other seeds in the middle to hit you. And this means you don't have to move during the fight. Playing Feed and Seed properly should end you up on 65 RNG changes from the ROM being initialized. AKA, you're going to be on this seed on screen. Now we're at Hammer Chime. The pattern he'll throw looks like this. This pattern is the same every time, and if it's not this, you either messed up Feed and Seed, or you're not on TTV 28. The hammer pattern will not change mid-fight and is fully decided at the start, as opposed to Hexos, whose pattern can change mid-fight, but we'll get back to that. As for RNG changes in this fight, they're a lot more unpredictable and are impossible to perfectly manipulate to an exact RNG amount, but we don't really need to. The fight enter progresses RNG by a seemingly random amount which I had a program find out the values for all TTVs. However, that's not that important. What is important is that we want to minimize RNG changes in the fight. Now, there's a difference between minimizing RNG changes and minimizing the time of the fight. The RNG changes whenever these nodes are on any screen, whenever this node is on the bottom screen, and whenever you hit a wrong drum. And to keep it short, if you ever hit a wrong drum, close out of the game and retry. A general rule you can follow to minimize RNG changes is to play generally a bit slower, but playing it quickly is pretty consistent as well. However, it can yield high RNG changes like this. Here's some footage of me playing a bit slower to get minimal RNG changes. And you can skip to this timestamp if you don't want to see that. Then, after beating Hammer Chime, hopefully your total RNG changes are between 902 to 1078 while in the menu for Hexo. Now that we're in the Hexo menu, we're gonna either learn or write down these 3 lines. These are essentially guides to the 3 different routes we can realistically hit. Now these are just the lines that I remember personally for blindfolded speedrunning, because that's what TTV28 was supposed to be, but it works really well for sighted runs as well. We'll get back to what these lines are later, but for now you need to know that there's Route A and Route B, which are the 2 most important ones, and then Route C. We're trying to find out which of the 3 routes we're on. And now that you're in the menu, you're going to enter practice mode in Hexo, not normal play mode. Then, you're gonna check if the red pad lights up. If it doesn't, you can exit and enter practice again and repeat. When it does light up red, go hit it. Then let the animation play out. And then exit. Then enter again. If it's not red, you're either on Route C or you're after Route A and B. If you're after Route A or B, you have to reset. But there's no way to know that, so you might as well try out for Route C. I'll get back to how you can do that later. However, if red pad lights up for a second time, you're on Route A or B, the main routes. To find out which, hit the red pad again, wait for the animation, and then exit, and then enter practice mode again. Now, if the blue pad lights up, you're on A, and you should run to the dark blue pad, hit it, let the animation play out, and exit. If it's dark green instead, you're on B, and you should just exit. And now we're gonna use these lines. I just came up with these for blindfolded runs because they're shorter and easier to remember, but they're basically the same thing as this whole gibberish shit. If we take 5x2 1.5.5.5, that basically means enter, let him full jump 5 times, exit, enter and exit twice, and then enter and let him jump without landing 3 times. And very important for this A route specifically is that during the 5 jumps, you need to stand still unless you really know what you're doing. For B route, the line is B 4x4 1.5, and this means that you should enter, hit blue pad, exit, enter, let him full jump 4 times, exit, enter and exit 4 times, and then enter and let him jump without landing once. (4xR1B 4x4 1.5) is the C route, or bait route as I like to call it. It's basically just the B route procedure, but with an added start part of 4xR1. 4xR1 means enter, 4 full jumps, exit, enter and hit red, exit, and then enter and exit once. And then the B route after that. And then you're lined up. So, after identifying which route you're on, and doing that respective line, you're now in the menu for God Hexo. Now, what's special about TTV28 God Hexo is that it's very lenient. The program that found this route filtered for a specific type of hexo that specifically lets you be slow without it affecting RNG. Normally, hexo jumping advances the RNG by 1 change, and it can do that in the run here. But this seed makes sure that the 3rd phase pattern is lime red yellow on not only the no hexo jump pattern, but also the hexo jump pattern. So unless you're really slow as hell, you should be able to get out of here 100% of the time. Now if hexo lands again, that's a problem and you're gonna have to reset. And that's basically it. If all you want is this tutorial, then that's it. Thank you for watching and good luck on your runs. You can DM me on Discord or leave a comment if you have any questions or any problems. If you want more info and more clarifications, you can keep watching. Now, all this info originally comes from Maziari's 330 tasks. And then from that video, I developed tools with ChatGPT, with the main one being this Python script. It can simulate a lot of RNG related stuff, and it's what I use to find this route. But there's a lot of numbers and syntax and stuff that I just wanted myself, because I was mostly doing this for fun, but I figure I should release this anyways. So it's in the description. And this is a command you can run to find this route for yourself, and you can also find your own routes doing this, like I did here after messing around for a bit. The rest of this info is just a lot of stuff I just want out there so it doesn't become like lost to time. The reason you have to stand still on A route is because when hexo jumps, he can either do a 21 change from the landing or a 22 change from the landing. Now I don't know what the formula is for this or like what it does, but from some really old and probably unreliable testing, it's about a 70% chance he does a 21 change and a 30% he does a 22 change. So for A route, something about him throwing a bone after the 2nd landing changes the RNG differently on the next jumps after. So standing still always yields the correct 22 changes, as opposed to moving, which might cause a 21 change. I don't think this applies to routes B and C, as I think they should be consistently 22s, but you might as well stand still. Now the idea of moving in the first place is to go forward to skip the bone throwing animation, but it only saves like 3 seconds when you have to wait like 55 anyways. And it could risk a reset, so TLDR, just stand still when hexo's doing jumping parts. Now, as I briefly mentioned, I did make a list of all the TTVs and all their Hammer Bro fight interchange amounts, and I'll just have it scrolling over the screen right now while I yap. And this list here is for specifically 65 changes after the initialization of the ROM or game. The reason we can't hit a wrong drum in Hammer Chime is because it changes the RNG by 1. I don't remember exactly how all the intricacies of Hammer Chime work, but essentially the filter filters for 2 lines, and there's a total of 16 lines in the game that go by like this pseudo formula. Playing Hammer Chime normally gets you on 2 opposite sides of these 16 lines, using these formulas. The steps variable here is the amount of changes you get from entering the fight. It's basically what's scrolling on the side here. So it's a sort of dual line pair, like 0 and 8, 1 and 9, 2 and 10, etc. Most often, you'll end up on the lines 4 and 12, because the Hammer Chime fight enter gives 12 changes at a 52% chance. And if we put in 12 changes into the formulas, we get 4 and 12 as our lines. However, TTV28, for instance, gets 14 changes. Hitting a drum wrong causes RNG to change by 1 and puts you on a higher line pair. So TTV28 route is lines 6 and 14, shown here with residue. And a wrong drum puts you at 7 and 15, and you'll 100% miss God Hexo. Now, you can't technically save it by pressing the wrong drum 15 more times to circle back, but it's not really that fast, right? We're trying to speedrun here, so just don't press the wrong drum, bro. Now this route I found here, the TTV28 route, it took a lot of trial and error, and I did make at least 4 other full routes before this one, before realizing every single time that I did something wrong. But it's fine, because TTV28 route is genuinely a godsend. Now this end part of the formulas here, well, I'm not quite sure what it is. I think it's some sort of bit overflow mechanism, where if the RNG change gets too high, it wraps around to a lower value again. So basically it's the same as this formula. Now this tutorial is mainly just for specifically this RNG Manip route, so I'm not gonna cover every little detail and every single RNG change. This should be good enough for most people. And that's about it. So if you have any questions, send a message on Discord or leave a comment or something, I don't know. And good luck on your runs.